Cam Akers is now a Minnesota Viking. Are the Vikings in a total panic spiral, or is maybe this not that big of a deal? Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast.
You like that? 3, 1, 2, 3. You like it?
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I am your host, Luke Braun. Let's find some joy today. You can find the Locked On Vikings podcast wherever you find your favorite shows, whether it is the SXM app, where you can find not only podcasts on the Locked On Network, but you can also go to SiriusXM and listen to live shows. You can listen to Vikings Chargers live on the SXM app. You can also find me on YouTube if you want, or Amazon Fire and Roku. Just download the Locked On Minnesota Sports app. Thank y'all so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day, each and every day. I appreciate you all so very much. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Today on the show, we're previewing the Chargers game. So I've got PrizePicks. I've got bold predictions for you. But first things first, we got to catch up, right? So on Wednesday, the Vikings traded for Cam Akers. I had already recorded the crossover with the Chargers. Otherwise, we would have talked about that for sure. But let's catch up now. So here's the deal you got to know. Cam Akers has a cap hit of $1.45 million. So very small cap hit last year of a rookie deal as a second round pick, obviously, and none of the prorated bonus that comes with that because that all stuck with the Rams. And the trade compensation was a conditional 6th for a conditional 7th. So, and Cam Akers. So we give up a conditional 6th that swaps for a 7th if Cam Akers, the condition is 500 yards from scrimmage. So if he gets 500 yards, we do a 6-7 swap in 2026. 3 years from now, we swap a 6 for a 7th. That is about as low as it can possibly get. That's functionally a waiver claim. So what this seems like, and the situation with Cam Akers had gotten pretty bad in LA. It seemed like they were pretty much done with him. And they were basically, this is you're going to cut him and I don't want to deal with waiver wire, so I'll give you nothing so that I can get him and not have to worry about somebody else getting him on the waivers. That's what this is. Here's the deal. This is opportunism. And Kwesi's really highly values being opportunistic and being at all points, right? Dalton Reisner, it depends on how they use him. I think there is some validity to, look, if he just replaces Ed Ingram, you go, okay, why didn't you do that in May, right? Why didn't you sign him in April after the draft? You knew you had Ed Ingram. Why didn't you sign him after camp? You saw him practice all year. Maybe you thought he'd do better in practice and he didn't. But, that's one thing. I still kind of think that has a lot more to do with who got injured than how people played. We'll see how he's used, though. If it turns out that he just starts eventually over Ed Ingram, you go, okay, come on, why wasn't he here for camp? With Akers, this is opportunism. This is getting word that the Rams are going to cut this dude and going, we'll take him. Yeah, we'll take that on. Let's try it. And we don't think we'll get him on waivers, so let's send a stupid fake draft pick thing. That's opportunism, right? I do not sense a panic in these moves. And I think I sense a panic in fans. I think we're panicking a little bit because we're 0-2, but I don't sense panic in these roster moves. I don't say, oh my God, we didn't get the move right. Let's buy nothing. We didn't get the roster right. Everybody, hair on fire. Let's go get the cheapest dude possible. If you're truly panicking about the running back situation, you're gearing up to trade for Jonathan Taylor. If you really think, man, we're about to lose this season, everything is totally borked, go get Jonathan Taylor, right? Go get somebody real. Go get Christian Wilkins. Cam Akers is not Jonathan Taylor. That is not we're about to lose our season because we didn't do the running back room well enough. That it's not a serious solution. If they are sitting there panicking over their 0-2 start, Cam Akers is not a serious enough solution for me to feel like, oh, they did something about it. But that's all I want to say on that. I think that people are either overthinking it or just trying to be flamey. Cam Akers himself. So I pulled up a little bit of tape. I've got a Patreon video that I'm going to do about him. And I think I'm going to put Reisner in it too and just kind of say, here's our two new guys. But the idea that I got is, if you look at the Vikings run game, there's just no explosiveness to it at all. And that's Madison, right? He's just not going to be the guy that gets greedy and tries to take a whole bunch of things. He used to be, and it was bad. He shouldn't be that guy. He's I'm going to lower my shoulder. I'm going to get my extra 1 yard, and whatever got blocked for me, and I'm stable. There we go. Now, gotta not fumble when you're that guy. But that's the running back that Alexander Madison is I'm going to make the right read, and I'm going to hit the hole, and when someone gets to me, I'm going to lower my shoulder, and I'm going to try to fight. Cam Akers has a totally different mentality. He's greedy. And greedy can be good if you have the athleticism to back it up, right? Adrian Peterson's greediest running back I've ever seen, right? He would go totally -2 yards or a touchdown. He never, ever, ever took a 10-yard gain as good enough. Madison takes a 3-yard gain as good enough, and I think that's fine. Peterson was psycho, right? And that's what part of what made him great was that he could house anything because he was always looking for a touchdown and never for a first down. Cam Akers is of that same ilk where he's always looking for the explosive play. And I don't think he's not Peterson, right? Like you kind of have to have a certain amount of juice to back that up. And so I see a lot of hesitation, at least especially in the week 1 Seahawks game. There's a lot of just, come on, just hit the hole, man. Just, it's not there, right? And they didn't run block particularly well. Bobby Wagner was all over the place in that game. So it's like, okay, it's not there. Lower your shoulder and hit it. That's kind of what I saw there. And every time he would get into that game against the Seahawks, this week 1 game, he would play like 1 rep and then come out. He'd do and then he'd do like 1 rep and then Kyren Williams would go in a bunch. And then like 1 more rep and then he'd come out. And it kind of felt like he was just there to spell Kyren Williams, and like that already was the depth chart. And then once it got to the end of the game and they were just running clock, then Cam Akers got a whole bunch of carries. So he got like 22 carries or something like that, but a lot of them came in a situation where you kind of would have the backup in. So he was not the starting running back in LA already. And part of that has to just be, I don't want to psychoanalyze, but it looks a little bit to me like his confidence was a little shaken there. He just wasn't hitting things and trusting himself the way that it looked like he was when I watched some tape from 2022, from like early 2022 before he got benched and all his stuff came down, right? Just didn't have that same kind of, I see it and I'm getting it, right? There's not that, there's always like a little bit too much wiggle on things and a little bit too much reading and hesitation, and not a lot of intentionality to it. That is, I think, what got him benched. And so what the hope is here, I think, has to be he's going to get his confidence back. And then that drive for explosiveness and that sort of never give up anytime you see a linebacker in the hole. Madison lowers his shoulders, hits the guy, falls forward for 2 more yards. Akers wants to make him miss. And there's pros and cons to both of those things. So we get a little thunder lightning. And I think that's the idea here is we got our thunder, we need our lightning. So this, I think it's not great news for Ty Chandler, certainly not great news for Myles Gaskin, who's just a waiver claim. But then again, not much difference between a waiver claim and what happened here with Cam Akers. So I think that's the play with the running back room. We'll see how much run he gets. They've said that they want to get him in this week, and because he's going from McVay to O'Connell, functionally the same playbook, a lot of the same terminology, so it shouldn't be too hard of a transition. At least that's what they've said, and I mean that makes sense to me. As for Reisner, he does not seem to be he's like, oh, I'm just trying to earn the trust of my teammates. Like, he's not saying like, I can't wait to get out there, So it doesn't sound like he's going to play right away, but that might just be a 1-week thing while he acclimates. It's going to take him a little longer. But it's kind of the same thing with him though. So I don't know, like he knows Chris Cooper, like he knows this run game, he knows zone run games. So I don't know how much longer it'll be for that, but there's also like chemistry and stuff like that. And then we'll see how Darisaw progresses, and there's like a whole bunch of moving parts there and trying to parse it out as a whole thing. So we'll just wait and see like where people end up playing. For the rest of the show, though, let's talk about the Chargers, and we'll go through some prized picks, and I've got your bold predictions, and I'm very excited about them. Always very fun. We got to go over what happened in the Philly game too, bold predictions wise. Didn't actually get to read those off. We had one that got very, very close. So we will get into that next. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. when you're trying to get tickets, let's say you want to go to this Vikings Chargers game, right? You're listening to this, it's Friday, the game's on Sunday, usually way too late, right? You're going to get price marked to hell, or you're going to get something, some terrible deal where you get like you got to go to the sketchy websites where you get scammed and all that. Go to Gametime instead. Gametime has flash sales at the last minute for last minute tickets, and make it so you don't have to plan months in advance for what you're going to do on a Sunday in September. You don't have to be thinking about it in like April. It's super easy to find and buy tickets for all kinds of events, not just sporting events, concerts, theater, whatever, other sports, of course. And the Gametime guarantee means you will always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and the same row for less, Gametime will credit you back 110% of the difference. And you can get a picture of your seat before you buy, so you know you're happy with the location. So download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. This episode is also brought to you by DoorDash. Here is something that has happened to me and my fiance a lot. We like to cook together, but whenever I do the groceries, I always forget something. It's just, I suck at it. All right. Just leave me alone. But DoorDash is super, super, super clutch, because when we are in the middle of a cook, and you don't have time to put everything down and go to the grocery store, but you know that in a few minutes, you're going to need something. You're going to need breadcrumbs or whatever. That is where DoorDash can come in. And of course, you can always get meals from your favorite restaurant. There's also, we've all had this where you buy groceries for something, but then you don't get around to cooking it for a while, and then it goes bad, and you're like, I was going to make that chicken. Now I don't have chicken. What am I going to do? DoorDash can help you with that as well. Get your fresh groceries when you need it, and you'll get exactly what you ordered, or they will make it right. So get 50% off of your first DoorDash order up to a $20 value when you use code LOCKEDONNFL at checkout. Limited time offer, terms apply. That's 50% off. Up to $20, no minimum subtotal, and zero delivery fees on your first order when you download the DoorDash app in the App Store and enter code LOCKEDONNFL. Don't forget that's code LOCKEDONNFL for 50% off of your first order with DoorDash. It's PrizePicks time. PrizePicks is daily fantasy made easy. This is, instead of putting together an entire daily fantasy team, I am just picking. I got 3 of my favorite prized picks right here. And I'm trying to think about the way that this game will go down, right? In talking to Daniel Wade and just kind of thinking about the Chargers a little bit more. So they're a quarter half team. They're the Fangio scheme. They're running what we ran last year, what the Packers have, what the Eagles have, right? So we're going to see a lot of the same offensive concepts that we saw against the Eagles, at least in the passing game. In the run game, I have to imagine something's going to be a little different, but we'll see, right? But we'll see a lot of those same kind of flag concepts and a lot of those full field concepts that are meant to punish trick safeties. For those who don't know, a tricks safety, it's like the cereal, is a backside quarter safety. That's all it means. So if you're in cover 4 or cover 4 on just one side of the field, because that defense does that, they'll be like cover 2 on one side, cover 4 on the other. The backside inside safety, so 1 over to the backside, will be often, or to the weak side with fewer threats. We'll be looking at the side with more threats and saying, if anybody comes across, I am going to lurk and try to intercept that ball if it gets thrown, right? That has been kind of the most powerful thing about that Fangio scheme. And it creates a lot of turnovers, right? Over the league. And so the Addison touchdown last week, I had a breakdown on Twitter if you want to see more about it, but it was a concept basically designed to put that guy in conflict, because that guy's job is to first look for a deep route coming his way. And then his second job is to look over to the other side. But it's usually he's reading the 2. So he's reading the second receiver, which I think in that play, it was a running back who is not going out for a route. So he sees, running backs into block. Okay, I'm poaching, without even seeing that there's a route coming from the one that's going to become part of his responsibility. And then you give him something to poach, right? Give him something to poach and then run a guy behind it. That's really the cover 8 beater or cover 6 beater that the Vikings used. And they had a lot of really good concepts against that style of defense. Well, here it is again, except this one's less blitz heavy and the secondary is a mess. And everything is falling apart on defense in LA. You listened to Daniel talk about it yesterday. So I've got 2 wide receivers here on my prized picks that I'm very excited about. First one is Justin Jefferson. more than half a touchdown. It could be passing, rushing, or receiving. They just kind of say, does he score a touchdown? And the way this works is I'll put this together, and then you can either do a power play where you have to hit all three, or you can do a flex play where you hit 2 out of 3 and then the payout is less. I like the power play. Look, man, we die like men. But I've got Justin Jefferson getting a touchdown, and then Jordan Addison more than 49.5 receiving yards, kind of for the same reason. Looking at the seasons that like J.C. Jackson has had, there's only one Derwin James. Guys are going to be open. Which guys those are, that's kind of what I am least confident in, but we'll see, and I'll test my skills. The other one I have to go for, just because it's a Vikings-Chargers game, there's going to be some kicker stuff, right? Field goals will be kicked, and whenever field goals are kicked in US Bank Stadium by the road team, they go in. It's just law. They have to. There's going to be a 65-yard field goal from the Chargers or something. It's insane, always. So Cameron Dicker, more than 1.5 field goals made. Feels like a lock and a half to me. I don't know. Just 2? That's it? Oh man, this dude's going to kick 5 and we're going to lose by 6 points or something like that. Come on. That feels a little bit too easy to me. There's a whole bunch of other stuff that I could sort of go in here, and there's some that I avoided because I didn't feel too confident in. But if you want to play as well, you can of course go to PrizePicks.com and TJ Hawkinson, they have right now at 51.5 receiving yards. So if you have the same idea as I do, but with Hawkinson instead of Addison, or maybe you can say maybe both of those guys do that, right? Kirk Cousins, 291.5 pass yards. I actually felt pretty good about that. Also, Justin Jefferson, 100.5 receiving yards. Kind of the same idea as he'll have a 100-yard game, but I decided a touchdown was a little bit more, was a little bit harder to prevent him from getting in the end zone than to prevent him from getting a whole 100 yards. Like, there's a world where the Chargers will do what the Lions did with JJ last year, where they shut down JJ in week 3 by having that poach safety key onto JJ, having a half safety on JJ's side, and also putting their best corner on JJ in press so that you can jam him. The Packers did something really similar with the Jair Alexander doing the gritty, that kind of game, except they didn't do the poach safety. They just had the safety over the top. So a little bit less help. But I could see the Chargers just being like, man, we have given up huge games to everybody so far, and now we got JJ. We just have to commit triples to him. Just 3 guys on JJ. Let's go. And I think that is going to just open up a lot more. But hey, if you disagree and you think whatever, it's like, I'm not scared of J.C. Jackson. He's going to go for a Hunsky again. Go for it. Kirk Cousins is at 291.5, more than less than pass yards. A little steep for me, although I do think the passing game will do well. I certainly wouldn't be surprised to see a 350-yard game or something like that. I also wouldn't be surprised to see that, like, I don't know, maybe the Vikings are ahead and they run a lot and we don't quite get the volume. And like that 291's a lot. So I'm just not touching that one. That one's not going to be in my play. So if you do that and you have these 3, it's 5-1. So if I put $20 into that entry, I win $100 if all 3 of them hit. And that is the beauty of PrizePicks. You get to do all of them together and get your payout, get a bigger payout. If you do the flex play thing because you're not all that confident, it's 2.5 to 1. So it's pretty significantly smaller. I know that those are not the predictions that everybody's here for. Bold predictions coming up next. Today's episode and your prized picks are, of course, brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is daily fantasy made easy. I went pretty conservative with mine right here. You can go with 3, 4, 5, 6 of your favorite players. I only went with 3. If you go with 6, you can get up to 25 times your money if you hit them all. So make sure you go to prizepicks.com. They also have all kinds of weekly promotions and stuff that can lead to big payouts, such as Taco Tuesday. Each Tuesday, PrizePicks will discount select player projections up to 25% to provide even more value. So make sure you are checking in on that kind of stuff. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL, and you can use code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. That's prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL, and use code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. PrizePicks, daily fantasy sports made easy. Thanks again so much for those of you who do listen to this show every single day. I appreciate you all greatly. Let's move on to the bold predictions. It is time to get wet, weird, and wild. So the Vikings played on a Thursday last week, as you are probably well aware, and that meant that we didn't get our Friday preview show like we usually do, so I couldn't read the bold predictions out loud, but I did take some down, and I tweeted them out for posterity, and we got very close, so let's go over them. The first one... let's go over the ones that didn't get close first. Zachary Hayes said the Vikings again have 3 turnovers, but 1 in every phase, offensively, defensively, and on special teams. So almost for that one, but Zachary Hayes, actually that one did get kind of close. Yeah, there's another one that got closer. That if you hadn't defined defensively the way you did, he said, so like a fumble return or something, like a Marlon Mack, or what's his name? Marlon McCree? Not Marlon Mack, that's the running back. Was it Marlon McCree? The guy on the Chargers that did that famously in the playoffs, where you get a pick and then you fumble it back, was how he needed the defensive one to go. That didn't happen, but the Vikings did get a defensive turnover, fumble on offense, fumble on special teams. So I'm giving you one in spirit, but obviously doesn't hit officially. By the way, if any of these do hit, I will attempt. I've never tried or learned the gritty. I will attempt it on this channel, and you can all laugh at me. Cleve said Ed Ingram receiving touchdown. Didn't get there. Skull Ross said the jersey numbers of touchdown scorers add to 38 for the Vikings and 7 for the Eagles. Multiple touchdowns means they are added multiple times. Hawkinson scoring twice wrecked that one for you. Skull Ethan said that there would be multiple safeties. Didn't get there. Malcolm, let's do the one from ET Spaceman first, who said Kirk Cousins will, in a fit of anger, throw a football at an opposing player while not on the field. There was some frustration for sure on that, but nothing to the effect of throwing a football. And then Malcolm Biggles had the one we were watching all night. Ivan Pace having the same number of pressures as Jalen Carter. Ivan Pace opened the game with 2 pressures. Like right off the bat, 2 pressures. I'm going, oh no. And the Vikings actually held up on Jalen Carter reasonably well at the end of all things. And I said that PFF would be the authority here because I didn't want any subjectivity. PFF gave Ivan Pace 3 pressures and gave Jalen Carter 3 pressures. Here's the deal. I think that's a bad beat. I think that I'm going to honor it. I honored what I said, but I feel like you got this because I feel like looking at the tape, I could put way more than 3 on Ivan Pace. I think he was in the backfield a lot, and it just depends on PFF's definition of like when you've hurried the quarterback and when you kind of just didn't quite get there in time, like what the difference is there. I think it's like really arguable, right? Like that is a very subjective thing, and they've got their thing on it, and then I'm deferring, but well done, Malcolm. Let's move on to week 3 versus the Chargers. And the first one that I'm going to read here, by the way, if you want to get your bold predictions in, you got to just wait for the thread. Some people send them to me on like Tuesday, and sometimes they're fun, and I love you, and I am sorry. I am just not going to remember. So I will put out a thread every Thursday morning that's like, bring me your bold predictions. It's in all caps, and it's got lots of fire emojis. You can't miss it. And you can put it in the thread there. The first one comes from King Squeaks, who says Cam Bynum will lead the league in tackles by the end of week 3. So I looked this up, and I love this one. This is the perfect amount of bold. So he's got 25 tackles. League leader has 30. He's in 4th place right now in tackles in the league. Cam Bynum is. So it's not the craziest thing in the world. He's going to have like a 15 tackle day. Like it's still going to have to be very bold, but it's not like, we're expecting someone to get 45 tackles. I'll never pick your bold prediction if you say something that is so outrageous as to be impossible. It needs to be just barely possible. And I feel like we're straddling that line perfectly because that also means we need guys like Bobby Wagner to not really get tackles, or TJ Edwards to not really get tackles, or Javon Holland, who's tied with Bynum, to not really get tackles. And Zaire Franklin is the one with 30. So like we need guys to like miss quarters or something like that, or totally get shut out of the game or something. And we need like multiple situations of that to happen, plus a big Cam Bynum game. Absolutely love it. We're parlaying like 4 really unlikely things. Let a Caleb Cook says the Vikings and Chargers combined for 5+ fumbles, and the Vikings recover all of them. Let's go. Luck regression. That's what we've been told this whole time, right? Certainly that's how regression works. I say it a lot, but for those who have never heard it before, we talked about this a ton last year. When you hear regression, make sure you double check that people aren't saying that, hey, if you go 0-6 in fumble recoveries, you'll go 6-0 in fumble recoveries. Regression is to a mean, not to overall. It needs to happen so that it evens out as fast as possible. The Vikings should expect to go 3-3 over their next 3 fumbles, or over their next 6 fumbles in terms of whether or not they recover them, if fumble luck is truly a 50-50 thing, which it bears out to be at least close. I think there's some skill to it, but ultimately the ball bounces funny. Skull Ethan says Cam Akers has more fumbles than yards. I love the fumble stuff. Let's get weird and in the gallows. We're still fumbling. Come on, they didn't fix it after 2 games? Get out of here. I expect fumbles. And if there's no fumbles, I'll be very, very, very happy they finally fixed a problem. More fumbles than yards. I think this has a possibility to happen if Cam Akers doesn't play as much as everybody thinks he's going to play. Here's Ty Chandler took like 4 snaps. Like he didn't do a lot. This could be a world where Cam Akers gets 2 carries and that's that. And if he gets 2 carries and one ends up being a loss and the other one ends up being a fumble, like that's the world, right? Now, if he gets 10 carries, that's going to be hard because all it takes is one, 6-7 yard run for this to become impossible. The 4-yard run for this to become functionally impossible. You're not gonna, after you fumble the 3rd time, you're not getting back on the field. So it needs to be like, we need to get this via small sample weirdness. Connor M says Madison redemption game, and he goes off for 150 plus and a touchdown. I love it. I love the idea of running on that Chargers defense with the horrible secondary and it would have to be like the that one Falcons game a few years ago. I think it was week 1, 2019, where they like threw a turnover and then they had another turnover and they just had this like total disaster start and the Vikings were up 21-0 by the end of the first quarter. And then they passed 11 times in that game. Like, I think it would have to be something like that. And then Madison can just sort of be really physical and have a lot of stamina and then suddenly kind of have one of those games where they say, oh, he's getting stronger as the game goes on. I think that is the scenario that we need for Madison to get 150 plus and a touchdown. Or, I mean, look, there could be a Madison explosive. I don't think he goes explosive very often. I don't think he's honestly looking for the explosive that often, like I mentioned at the beginning of the show. And I think that's okay. So this needs to be a volume game. And the only way to have a volume game from Alexander Madison is to be leading by an outrageous amount for most of the game and have this thing be over by the second quarter and boring. JV, which is also, a lot of people said like this game is boring as their bold prediction. And I like the energy. Not specific enough for me to pick it, but I think you guys, all of you that said, this is actually just a totally normal, boring game with nothing interesting to say about it. You can latch on to this Madison redemption game thing, because if he goes off for 150 and a score, then this was the game that you were predicting. So y'all can latch on to this one. That represents you. JV Swaps says, Jefferson and Cousins throw the same number of touchdown passes. This one, I can only take it if it can't be 0. I can't do, like, you can't have your bold prediction be Kirk Cousins doesn't throw any touchdown passes. That happens sometimes. Sometimes it's all rushing touchdowns, or maybe the offense has a bad day or something. Like, that happens, and it isn't all that outrageous. Not outrageous enough for this here bold prediction segment where everything has to be on fire. But Jefferson throwing a touchdown pass and having the same number as Cousins, now we're getting to that territory. So Jefferson has to at least throw one here. And then then it has to be Cousins throwing one, right? Unless we get 2 Justin Jefferson passing touchdowns, which, I mean, goodness gracious, if that's the case, then I think I have to shut the segment down. We're never topping it. But that's my stipulation. It can't be 0. And then the last one I'm going to do, I mentioned in the crossover yesterday, comes from Ragnar's Ghost, who says Justin Jefferson breaks the single game receiving record, leading Brandon Staley's last game as a Charger. So here's the thing, Ragnar's Ghost. I should mention he is a Chargers and Vikings dual fan. So first off, find God. Second off, it's like, you're going to hurt yourself. Second off, I would have totally given this to you if it was just Brandon Staley gets fired after the game, right? Because look, he's on the hot seat, but week 3 is really, really early to do that. I think week 4, 5 is kind of pushing it. We've seen it a couple times. Week 3 is like a lot. We're 18 days into the season, right? That's super reactionary. And I get that he's on the hot seat, and I don't know if he makes it to the end of the season at all. So week 3 is already a pretty bold place to be. And I think if we get that blowout, that Madison game blowout, and Brandon Staley gets fired after it, like, I think that's what it's going to take. That's usually what it takes with coaches that are not total catastrophes. You're not Urban Meyer. You're not winning 4 games over and over again, like Cliff Kingsbury or whatever. Well, even Cliff Kingsbury had some like really good Cardinals teams that then fell away. When you're in that Brandon Staley world where the Chargers are a bubble team, right? Playoff bubble team. Their division sort of dominated by the Chiefs, and they'll make it into the wild card sometimes. Do they win a wild card game or not? Brandon Staley hasn't yet. He hasn't, and he didn't make the playoffs a couple years ago. If you have a coach like that, typically what it takes, like, just a string of mediocre over and over again, it's really hard for that to happen. It has to be something really bad. You have to do really bad. Either a really nasty blowout, like what got Nathaniel Hackett fired last year, was a nasty blowout against the Rams. Or it has to be, we're 3-8, that kind of thing. Like even with Mike Zimmer, who ended up being, I think, what were they, 8-9 by the end of that year? They were 1-5. And that was the really bad start, right? That you needed it to be really bad. And then things behind the scenes started to fall apart. And even though they won games, it was enough to get the playoffs or you're fired ultimatum going, right? So there's got to be something in there, right? So it has to be a blowout for Brandon Staley to get fired. So all I'm saying is you didn't have to tack on the Justin Jefferson breaking the single game receiving record, but you did. So I'm making you honor it. That is 336 yards is the receiving record. Who got that? It was Flipper Anderson in 1989 for the Los Angeles Rams. So another Los Angeles team. I hope that happens. Let's do it. All right. 400 yards for Justin Jefferson, and we'll get Brandon Staley fired. And that will make Ragnar's ghost very happy. I'll see you all on the other side of the weekend. All right. We'll talk about what happened in the game. We'll do the postcast. We've got, of course, Minnesota football party and all that stuff coming up too. So I will see you all for that. And as always, Skol.